So we're finally at the end of this series. Don't ask me why it took almost 3 years to cover 5 games. Anyway, let's dive into the current and what might possibly be the last Monolithsoft Crossverse game as we look back on 2015's Project Cross Zone 2 for the Nintendo 3DS. Now just a reminder that this Project Cross Zone 2 retrospective is brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss and Echolocation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. While it hadn't set the world on fire, Project Cross Zone had sold 500,000 copies by late 2014. This was considered a success by publisher Bandai Namco, who immediately requested director Sorichiro Morozumi and producer Koji Ishitani to begin working on a sequel. Thus, once again, Morozumi's team at Monolithsoft would seek to refine the gameplay and story elements like they did with Endless Frontier in order to make a similar yet superior game on the same console. As I mentioned in the last video, Project Cross Zone had a couple of issues which this team hoped to fix with this new game. This included faster characters mopping up all the enemies before slower characters could do anything, and the game basically getting the player to cycle through every attack every turn. Alongside fixing the gameplay issues, the team also hoped to improve the character roster too, with more modern and recognisable reps than had previously been seen in the first game. Arguably one of the biggest additions was the inclusion of Nintendo characters. With Xenoblade Chronicles being a massive success for Monolithsoft, it seemed kinda strange that it got no representation in Project Cross Zone due to it being a Nintendo IP. Thus this time the team sought out Nintendo's permission to add in Xenoblade Chronicles characters. Alongside Xenoblade reps, the team also got permission to add characters in from the Fire Emblem series too. With Project Cross Zone 2 being an SRPG, it made sense to get characters from the series which created the genre. With Project Cross Zone being a success in the West, Project Cross Zone 2 would be developed with a Western release in mind. This is shown for the world to see, with the game first being teased at Bandai Namco's Level Up press event in Milan, Italy in early 2015. The game would probably be announced soon after for a worldwide release at the end of the year. In Japan, the game would be titled Project Cross Zone 2 Brave New World, however the subtitle would be dropped for the Western release of the game. Alongside dropping the subtitle, Project Cross Zone 2 would also face a delay in the West, with the worldwide release instead turning into a 12th of November 2015 release for Japan and a February 12th/16th release for PAL and NTSC territories respectively. With the first game being somewhat of a success, Bandai Namco would more aggressively push the marketing of Project Cross Zone 2, and this would introduce the series to myself, who just finished playing Xenoblade Chronicles and Fire Emblem Awakening. Interested in seeing characters from 2 of my favourite games, I was very keen to try out this game. More so after I downloaded the first game on my 3DS and completed it. So buying this game day one, let's see how well Morozumi's team did in perfecting this zone crossing adventure. Like in all previous games in the series, we once again begin with a text scroll, which has a lot of similarities with the text scroll in the original Namco Cross Capcom. Once again, we learn about the centuries-long war between the forces of Orma and Shinra being fought in secret. We also learn this war is being fought through many different worlds, running in parallel with our own. We also learn about how 10 years ago Orma was dealt a crushing blow when the forces of Shinra teamed up with a series of heroes from across parallel worlds to fight them. However, we also learn about how in recent days mysterious golden chains begin to appear across the multiverse, with nobody knowing where they come from or where they lead. We then jump to the city of Roppongi in Tokyo, where we meet Reggie Araizu, who's once again waiting for his partner Zaimu to show up. Eventually, the 500-year-old fox casually shows up, much to Reggie's annoyance, as he tells her they're in a hurry to meet up with the Resident Evil characters of Chris and Jill in order to investigate the mysterious golden chains. Suddenly, the two are attacked by unknown enemies, forcing the two to jump into action. After defeating the enemies, a giant vehicle suddenly appears, and out hops Dr. Urishima, a fellow Shinra agent who shows off her brand new troop transport, the Dragon Turtle Mark I. Reggie and Zaimu are quite impressed with the new vehicle, and together the three hop in to drive off and meet up with Chris and Jill. Meanwhile, across the multiverse, heroes both familiar and unfamiliar are becoming self-aware of the golden chains appearing in their world, and the fact that these worlds are starting to cross again, with heroes and villains of different time and place showing up in each other's universes. As the story continues from there, Reggie and Zaimu try to solve the mystery of the golden chains while running into familiar and unfamiliar faces as they battle through the multiverse. Presentation wise, Project Cross Zone 2 is pretty similar to the first game. Once again, we have a party of heroes from different Namco, Capcom and Sega games, and they'll find themselves completing a series of 5 prologue chapters as well as 42 regular chapters. While this might seem like a lot of chapters to complete, as we'll see later on, Project Cross Zone 2 has a few tweaks to thankfully speed up the gameplay loop. Like last time, the game once again is heavily story focused, with a large number of character introductions taking place both before, after and during each stage. Interestingly, these interactions now offer much more closer up models of the characters than had previously been seen in the last game, although the far shots are still used as well. As for the characters themselves, you might have noticed in the story section that Reggie and Zaimi are back as the leads for the first time since Namco Cross Capcom. This makes the duo the first characters to lead 2 of these crossover games. In a lot of respects, Project Cross Zone 2 does feel like somewhat of a retread of Namco Cross Capcom, with a lot of similar story beats, and the fact that Saya is once again our main antagonist, although this time she's joined by her American colleague Sheath. Meanwhile, as for the game's protagonist, we mostly keep to the Project Cross Zone 1 cast, with a couple of changes. On the Namco side, Lin is now paired with Street Fighter's Chun-Li, while Jin is now paired with his father Kazuya, meanwhile Heihachi is still a solo unit. Kite is now paired up with Hasayo from Dot Hack GU. Yuri is now paired up with Flynn, while Stell is a solo unit. Alicia is now by herself as a solo unit in her God Eater 2 outfit, while God Eater 2's Seo and Nana join the team. Cosmos is now paired with Xenoblade's Fiora, while Telos is just a villain. Valkyrie returns as a solo unit, Natsu joins bringing a Soul Calibur rep back to the game, and finally Artie joins from the Summer Night series. On the Capcom side, Chris and Jill return alongside Leon from Resident Evil 6 as a solo unit. Dante is now paired with his brother Virgil, meanwhile Dimitri is paired with Morrigan while Felicia returns from Namco Cross Capcom. X and Zero return as the only Mega Man reps this time. Strider returns from Namco Cross Capcom and is now paired with Hotsuma from Sega's Shinobi. Ryo and Ken return along with Ingrid, who is quite the odd choice for a Street Fighter rep. Meanwhile, Juri is back to being just a pure villain like Telos. Phoenix Wright and Maya join from the Ace Attorney series as a strange paired up solo unit. Captain Commando returns from Namco Cross Capcom, and finally June brings us our first Star Gladiator rep. Meanwhile on the Sega side, Akira is joined by Kage Mari, while Pai is a solo unit. Ichiro is now paired with Erika, while Sakura is now paired with Gemini. Kazuma and Goro join from the Yakuza series. Zephyr is now paired with Vacheron, while Leanne is a solo unit. Ulala returns to rep Space Channel 5, Axel joins to rep Streets of Rage, Hibana joins from Nightshade, Ryo joins from Shenmue, and finally we have Segata from the 90s Japanese Sega Saturn commercials. And then finally on the Nintendo front we have Trom and Lucina representing the Fire Emblem series. As you can see, there has been an attempt to bring some more recognisable reps into the game, with representation from the Yakuza and Shenmue series now appearing over reps from Cyberbox and Zombie Revenge. You may also notice there are only 19 pair units and solo characters compared to the last game's 20. This has led to some rumours that previous protagonists Mi and Kogoro were supposed to be in the game but for some reason were dropped. Staying on the topic of characters, like the previous game, we once again have a series of prologue and main stages to get through in order for Reggie and Zaimi to save the multiverse. And like last time, we can customise characters between each stage by equipping them with new gear, as well as practicing button timing in a training arena. However, we also have the ability to buff our characters' individual attacks using the new SP resource. Alongside this, SP can also be used to purchase character-specific skills to assist them in battle, which, speaking of which... Going over to the gameplay, battles are played much out in the same way as they are in Project Cross Zone 1, with one massive exception. As you will notice, we no longer have AP or any form of turn order system, as we now simply have a player phase and enemy phase, which you can select all your units one after another in any order. This means we no longer have any of the issues as seen in the previous games of units being left in the dust due to being unable to act at the right time. Along with this, we can now also set up the initial starting points of our units before battle, like in a lot of other SRPGs. Along with the change to move orders, Project Cross Zone 2 has also made several changes in order to make the game more strategic. This is done by now restricting the number of attacks you can make in combat, with initially being locked at 3. Along with this, button inputs that are not used in the attack will be charged up and made more powerful for the character's next attack. As a result, we are past the point of cycling through all the character's attack, and as a result, combat is being made much faster as a result, which is also driven by the enemy's health bars being drastically reduced. Along with the changes to the turn order and attack moves, we also have some new features. For a start, characters now have new individual SP gauge used for character skills as well as the defense and counter command. Meanwhile, the party-wide XP gauge remains in order for the full defend command as well as special attacks. The XP command can also be used for the new Mirage Cancel ability, which will cause time to slow down and as well as allow characters to perform additional attacks. However, with it also costing 100 XP, I normally just stick to the more powerful special attacks. Alongside the new SP gauge and Mirage attacks, we also now have the new addition of Field Traps. These traps will hurt or apply status effects to any character who walks over them. While they are pretty easy to avoid, you can often goat enemies into walking through them and gain additional damage on them. Altogether, Project Cross Zone 2 offers a bunch more options when it comes to the battle, both in setup and actual gameplay. At the top of the we have a really nice soundtrack playing in the background during these stages. Project Cross Zone 2's soundtrack is somewhat of a collaborative effort between multiple composers, thus crediting one person for the job isn't really possible. Like in previous games, the vast majority of Project Cross Zone 2's soundtrack comes from remix tracks from the reference games. Like last time, when a character is selected, they'll have one of their two tunes play, or they'll sometimes have the theme of their solo unit play instead. This song will then play until either another unit is selected or the turn ends, in which the mat theme will play over the enemy's turn. As with these song selections, there's been multiple changes to the songs which will play, with Cosmos switching out Battle of Your Soul for She's Coming Back, while Kai gets a new version of Stairs of Time. Obviously, we also have new songs for the characters from new series such as Phoenix Wright with Pursuit, Cornered. Altogether, I do like the more orchestral sound to the soundtrack, despite it still being very MIDI. It just feels like there's been more of a concerted effort to get the choir sound in songs like Engage the Enemy, and in general, I find myself listening to this game's soundtrack more so than the first Project Cross Zone. While the game's soundtrack is an improvement, there hasn't been much of an improvement in the voice acting. The game still remains predominantly voiceless, with dialogue only being used in critical cutscenes and for battle quips. And once again, we only have the sub option and no English voice acting to enjoy. Finally, we should talk about the game's opening and closing song. As for the game's opening song, we have Sekai wa Hitotsu no Butai, or All the World Stage. And for the closing song, we have Suki Akari no Curtain Call, or Moonlight Curtain Call, which are both composed by Namco Cross Capcom composer Yuzo Koshihiro. Meanwhile, the lyrics were written by none other than Morozumi himself, while the singer, Marina Nakamura, would perform the vocals. Both these pieces are personal favourites of mine, and I might say that both of my two top favourite songs in the series, outranking other vocal songs like Wing Wanderer and Unchained World. As in the opening cinematic, we have Graphinica supplying the animation after previously working on the cutscenes for Xenoblade Chronicles. In my honest opinion, this is the best opening cinematic in the series. No weird flashing dots or boob jokes in this opening, as it just gets right into the action as we see all the characters duke it out across the multiverse in a cinematic that always gets me hyped into this game. As you might be catching on by now, I'm a pretty big fan of this game. To me, Project Cross Zone 2 is arguably the best game in the series. The game takes what works in the first Project Cross Zone and improves it in almost every way. After the first game saw you mindlessly button spam your way through enemies, Project Cross Zone 2 actively tries to make the game more strategic by allowing you to move whatever character you want, while at the same time limiting the attacks you can make. Alongside this, the new customizable attacks and skills allow for a more interactive experience in comparison to the almost visual novel gameplay of the previous games in this series. Along with improvements in gameplay, we also have improvements in other areas. The cast in most ways is an improvement over the first game. While they'll miss the Valkyria Chronicles characters, the introduction of popular characters from Yakuza and Fire Emblem are clearly much more important reps. Alongside these better reps, we also have things like the new cut-in animations during specials, which really takes the graphics to a whole new level. However, while I think Project Cross Zone 2 has done a lot to improve this series, it still falls short in a lot of ways compared to other SRPGs. While the new customization and attack options make the game more strategic, it's still mostly a button spam, with little actual strategy needed to win most stages. Dialogue exchanges can still play out way too long, and the game's humour is dependent on you having actually played a lot of obscure games, even with the more recognisable reps. So I guess we're at the end of this series. While I could wrap it up here, I do want to talk about the future of this series. Obviously, in early 2017, both series director Sorichiro Morozumi and producer Koji Isatani left Monosoft, and with it most hopes of a sequel. While a lot of the team is still at Monosoft, they have since moved on to other projects. Interestingly, there was actually quite a bit of talk around a supposed Project Cross Zone 3, after Hideki Kamiya of Platinum Games expressed how he wanted Bayonetta to appear in the game. However, it's been over 9 years since Project Crosszone 2 came out, and I think most people have moved on from the Project Crosszone series. With the death of the 3DS, there really isn't a budget platform to release a game like Project Crosszone on. While it could appear on the Switch, it'd mostly come with a graphical upscale, which is not only too expensive for a series like this, but also would make the notable art style clashes in the game much more noticeable, with the realistic characters coming up against the anime characters. Sad reality is that the games we have now are probably it. Microsoft has moved on to much bigger projects, and the novelty of these crossovers don't really mean as much when we have mobile games doing promotional crossovers every second day. Also, add on to the fact that companies like Bandai Namco are more focused on licensed anime games over their own IPs, and you can see just what hurdles Project Crosszone 3 would have to overcome in order to come to fruition. While I haven't had the biggest praise for these games, it's not as if I didn't have fun with them. Reggie and Simon have quickly grown into two of my favourite video game characters of all time, and I wish we could see them return in another game. Perhaps they can find their way into the next Xenoblade game as DLC, and make their first 3D debut. I just hope we can salvage at least something from this unique series. In the meantime, thanks for following me as I slowly covered these games. Now with some time freed up, I can cover some of my other pending retrospectives. I also might do a ranking video of these games if you're interested, so you can see how I put them up against each other. Until then, I'll see you later.